Hello and welcome to the space between ideas. I'm Blank Gates. Now, I'm really my mind is being just pulled down to the depths and darkness of the universe to try to pull out some kind of, what's that word? Insight, really. Actually, the word, if you really want to know what the word is, we can go to one of my one-pagers. We go into the imitate. That's where it is. So, in the case of creating something from nothing, you have creative people that are very sensitive to patterns, emotion, and seem to be able to reach into the unseen realms and pull into existence ideas and innovation that are not visible to regular people and that have utility. Do we need so the question is, do we need to find people that have the ability to reach into the darkest depths of the universe and extend beyond the limits of time and space? Or do we need to make sure that we have a clear plan regarding how to keep up with the latest developments internally and find methods to collaborate with specialists externally? Yeah. So I'm in the process, I'm trying to dig deep, I'm trying to get into those deep areas of the universe. And because I'm looking for the, I'm looking for the, this, what was the spark of the Big Bang? That's what I'm looking for. What created creation? That's where I'm at. Now the issue is here. So if you're going to create some kind of program, see, the problem is that when you're at the decision level, that means that you've already had like two levels. So you have your C level, who has already given you the context of the business, the overall business cycle, the overall business model, the market fit. So that gives you the big picture. And then after you have the big picture, then you go to the developmental or the departmental level, and this is where you start to bring the people into the room. So I know what we're talking about. All right, so what we're talking about is potential. So when you're looking at the C level, what they do is they give you the goal. So they give you the vision. They don't actually deliver the effects, but they give you the vision for the effects. It's like, what are we aimed at? What are we going for? What is going on? And then they understand clearly what is the potential. So when they're exciting motivations, they're not actually at this results level. They're not actually delivering the deliverables, but they are articulating the deliverables, and they have an idea of the reuses. So they can see into the future. They understand the resources that they have right now, and they understand that through the plans and actions, they will be able to reach those outcomes and then create those reuses. And then those reuses funnel back into the resources. So this is the C level. They're all about motivation. And then the C level, they put together, the people who are going to be guiding the interactions. So they hire the people who will be guiding. So who's in the room? That's talking about guiding the interactions. What are we up against? All right, so that's the competition and the issues that we're going to resolve. Now, at this point, we already have significant context. We know the team. We've talked about inventiveness. We understand our resources. We have vision. We know where we're going. And so at this point, we already know. And the problem with this course that I'm trying to create right now is that if you start here, then it's like, where's the context? I've been reading, I've been creating this, like, how do we get to, well, if we talk about the checklist called impact, this is where we actually make a decision. So I realized that actually the assumptions checklist comes first, right? The assumptions come before the scenarios. All right, are we going to get cut off? All right, so something's wrong with Loom. It's giving me much more time than usual. All right, so that's the thing, is when we talk about building scenarios. So let's take another quick look at the impact checklist. See, look, it says develop scenarios. That's step number 2. Step number 1 is frame context. Now the context, you're going to frame the context based on making assumptions. And those assumptions, the thing is that those assumptions are based on what kind of interactions do we have, what kind of motivations do we have, what kind of resources do we have. So this actually all goes into the assumption process. So therefore we have 2 problems. All right, so we can remove the state impact checklist. So although, yes, we do need to work on state impact eventually, because we're going to have to develop those scenarios, but that's actually step 2. Step 1 is developing these assumptions. And the assumptions, look, teamwork, jump back here again, teamwork is here, guide interactions, inventiveness. Inventiveness is part of scenarios, but in this step, it's actually part of... Well, the interesting thing about inventiveness is that this checklist, it has a very interesting question. And the question is it's actually about skills. It's actually talking about what are the capabilities of your team. So if we go into the inventiveness checklist, and we go to the topic. It says, envision matches and mismatches between needs for innovation and the proclivities of participants. Now, when we're talking about proclivities of participants, what are we really talking about? So we're asking, do your people have the ability to innovate? If they don't, then it's okay. You can just use these principles. All right. So let's talk about imitate. Let's talk about integrate. Let's talk about implement. Let's talk about, and I don't know how innovation has all these I words, but somehow he did it. All right. So that means that when we talk about innovation, in here, this thing, inventiveness, we're actually talking about the skill to innovate. We're talking about a resource. Now, when we talk about synergies, we're also talking about resources. We're talking about entities as a resource. All right. So maybe you're like, what are you talking about, resource? So, when you look at that table, there's actually a state resources checklist. So when we look at this table here, and we talk about involving resources, the C-level, the CEOs and the C-levels, they understand resources. Progress is actually this whole thing. So this is in general the idea of progress. And here it is, resource. All right. So now if we jump into resources, so we're talking about skills, but actually here is we're talking about entities. So when we talk about inventiveness, we're talking about skills. When we talk about synergies, we're talking about entities. Now, when we jump into the assumptions checklist, now we're talking about what data do we have? What data do we already have in the form of a resource? And then, of course, the infrastructure, the skills and entities as they work together in a team, that is also going to influence our assumptions. So, I'm just trying to find where does this all start? How do we really know what we're doing, where we're going? I think it has something to do with this. So this idea is called create insight. This is actually the whole purpose of the book. It's called Create Crucial Insight. Now, if we take out the word crucial, it just leaves us with create insight. So chapter 4 is where it actually starts. Create useful concepts, cross-check plans, estimate value, help people communicate or cooperate, organize communications, perform business-like activities. Like, that's really what it means to create insight according to the book. And then here is the very central idea of the book. But even at this point, we're already at aspects of the endeavor. So this means that we've already decided what the endeavor is. Have we got more than 10 minutes? All right. we got more than 10 minutes. All right, so now the point is that now when we get to here, it's like, all right, but like, you know, what is the endeavor? How do we get to the endeavor? Now, likely you already have an idea of what your endeavor is. You know what your business is. You know what you're doing in your business. But do you? Like, do you really know? Like, how do you move beyond where you are right now? How do you get better results? How do you think outside of the box? And that's where I came up, where I found this. So we're still in the Create Insight section, from endeavor elements to some types of activities. So, I mean, endeavor and activities is kind of like... And remember, it said aspects of endeavor, and activities is some kind of aspect of endeavor. And then we have the endeavor elements. So it's like the elements of an endeavor that you're going to create some effects. You're going to have some plans. You're going to have some potential. And all of these things fit within programs. And so I was thinking like, all right, well, you know, how do we... So then I took all these programs and I put them within... So we have, you know, the same 4 levels, the C level, department heads, the project level, and the workers. Then I took all of these ideas, and I'm in the process of trying to figure out, like, all right, so if we're talking about C level endeavors, then we're trying to affect financial success, we're trying to manage risk, we're trying to affect leadership, we're trying to make decisions. And, you know, if we're in the workers, it's different. You know, we're trying to implement decisions, we're trying to accomplish work. So those could be endeavors. But then, like, you know, yesterday I was talking to one guy. He is the CEO of a factory that produces packaging. And he was talking about supply chain issues and that he wants to develop more suppliers. So he wants to have at least 2 or 3 suppliers, just in case of climate change or transport issues or war or anything like that. He needs to have more options because he wants to manage risk. Here it is, manage risk. So this is the question. It's like, did Tom, from this Tom, so I'm talking about Dr. Buckles, has Tom, like, is this the complete list? Because he's a physicist. So the whole point of being a physicist is to take out the elements and to have a complete and full list of elements so that I can ponder, so that I can sit here and I can say, all right, so as a C level, how do I affect financial success? And as I think about this thing, how am I going to affect financial success? Then I can start to come up with an endeavor. All right. So, for example, he was thinking about managing risk, and he's thinking, how can I manage risk? What's some area where I need to manage risk? And now, so we started at the top level. So we talked about synergies. Now, when we jump into synergies, we started our conversation about, he wanted to talk about expanding cooperation with providers and vendors. And I was asking him, like, what long-term goals do you need to focus on to enjoy the most ideal future? So we started in this box, and he had 2 ideas. So one idea, he said, all right, well, I need to have a backup supplier for critical components. And in addition, I need to have a database so I can keep track of the suppliers. So that's right here. All right. So we want to, and also, so that's, well, it's not exactly expanding cooperation. That's expanding the number of suppliers. But then he also said that in addition to having like 1 or 2 suppliers, he also wants to develop a local supplier. So in this case, we would expand the cooperation with that local supplier by developing some kind of product or raw material with that local supplier, and then eventually possibly acquire them or just allow them to develop in the local market. So we were in this box. Now from there, then, as you can see, you probably noticed this is the same as that, you know, what I was just showing you. So then he continued to talk about some reuses, talked about some outcomes, he talked about some plans, he talked about building some, no, he didn't talk about plans. We just talked about action and outcomes and reuses. So this is a CEO, right? So he's giving the vision. He's going to let somebody else do all the rest of these things. All right, so this is the part where I'm working right now, is like, how do we categorize endeavors? What does it mean to really have an endeavor? Because once we have that endeavor, then we can start this section here, where we are determining. All right, so there's this idea here, determine. So you look, describe an endeavor of interest to people. And that's the first sentence. Describe an endeavor of interest to people. So if you can't come up with your own endeavor, I was trying to figure out, like, where is the categories of endeavors that we can start to consider. Anyways, that's 15 minutes, probably long enough. So we'll catch you tomorrow. Or not tomorrow, but Monday. That's Space Between Ideas. I'm Blaine Gates.